Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. With the second wave of the pandemic, COVID-19, rhinoorbital mucormycosis is currently in the headlines. But there can be some other causes of inflamed orbit that need to be differentiated. So what can be the differential diagnosis and how to cool down a hot orbit? Today's our topic, our discussion is on that only. My co-speakers are Dr. Joita Dash, Dr. Anirban Bhaduri, and Dr. Chandana Chakraborty. So do not consider all hot orbits as cellulitis or as thyroid or orbital disease. It can be the lesions like cystosarcosis or malignancy, which if not detected or treated on time can not only threaten the vision, can also threaten the life. So first I'll take up with the approach to a patient with hot orbit. Now, what is an hot orbit? It is an inflamed orbit. It's a painful, red, tight orbit. Causes can be inflammatory, infective, or malignancy. The infective causes are due to bacteria, fungus, virus, and parasite. The inflammatory causes are active thyroid eye disease, idiopathic orbital tumors. And malignancies can be both in primarily occurring in the orbit or can be a metastatic from a distant site. Now, how to approach such a patient? First of all, you have to take a thorough history, take a thorough clinical examination, send the patients for appropriate diagnostic tests. Imaging comes the first, and then the other ancillary tests like hematology, histopathology, microbiology, molecular diagnosis. In the history, we have to consider the age of the patient. Suppose a middle-aged man suddenly comes with a painful, red, swollen, proptosed eye for a period of about 3 to 6 months. Then we can have some differentials in our mind. It may not be the infective case, it may be something else. Yes, in the history, the onset and duration are also important. Systemic symptoms like pain, swelling of the eyes, redness, double vision, decreased vision, and is in this background of COVID pandemic, nasal discharge, bleeding from nose, and altered sensorium. All these are very important. History of systemic illnesses include the history of fever, history of thyroid disorder, some metabolic diseases like diabetes mellitus, human immunodeficiency virus, COVID infection, steroid therapy, iron overload, breast, abdominal, genitourinary problems, and hematological malignancies, etc. Now, clinically, you have to evaluate the patient of a proptosed eye, painful ophthalmoplegia, chemosis, congestion, discoloration of the overlying skin, poikilothermia, vision loss, increased resistance to retropulsion, palpable orbital lump. Now, case-wise, I'd like to show you how to approach such a case. This is a small child presented with swollen erythematous eyelid with minimal proptosis. It is very difficult to separate the eyelids, but yes, to some extent, it gives us a clue that it can be of infective etiology, but it is very sudden onset, 1 or 2 days. This is a patient, middle-aged female patient who presented with severe proptosis, inflamed eyelids, swollen, and chemosis, and as well conjunctival prolapse we can see. Now, by seeing the patient, we have something in our mind that yes, it can be a case of malignancy, or it can be a case of orbital cellulitis, which has led to the development of an orbital lump. Now, this is another patient. Here, the eye is red, mainly inferiorly. The lids are tight. There is proptosis, and a resistance to retropulsion is present. Interestingly, the swelling is more in the inferiorly, but the inferior eyelid is not tender or red, but it is definitely swollen. This is a small child who had an S-shaped ptosis. Surprisingly, the congestion was limited to lateral part. There was esodiviation, the mild proptosis, And on palpation, there was a tender lump in the superolateral orbit. It came out to be a case of acute dacroadenitis in a small child. Now we send for some blood tests, like we know to complete hemogram, peripheral blood smear, coagulation profiles, inflammatory markers like ESR, CRP, thyroid profile, and blood glucose profile. Imaging, the CT scan being the investigation of choice, the role of MRI is not well established. It detects optic neuritis, status of the orbital apex, intracranial extension of the infections, like infections spreading to the brain in cases of rhinoorbital mucormycosis, or in cases where we can suspect cavernous sinus thrombosis, or we are suspecting meningitis or brain abscess. MRI is better than CT only in those cases. Otherwise, CT scan is the investigation of choice. Now, this is how the imaging helps us. If you remember the first case, it was a small child with this inflamed eyelid. We did a CT scan orbit, the axial plates showing diffuse soft tissue thickening and areas of enhancement anterior to the orbital septum. So the orbital shadow was almost clear. All the lesions was confined in the preseptal place. And both the clinical and these radiological features were supportive of the presence of a preseptal cellulitis. Now, this is the sagittal plate of the patient. Now, in this case, this middle-aged lady, though we are thinking of some malignancy, but after ordering this imaging, we had this extracorneal soft tissue mass with fat stranding accompanied by sinusitis. Now, this is a case of orbital cellulitis. Now, this extracorneal mass, it can be presented in intracorneal space also. In other cases of orbital cellulitis, we can have associated edema of the extraocular muscles. And in cases of the condition becomes more serious, there can be development of intraorbital abscess or subperiosteal abscess. Now, this patient was a middle-aged patient, had hypotropic proptosed eye with ptotic lid, and patient had a fever, non-remitting fever. On advising the imaging, there was hypo or isodensity, juxtaosseous lesion in the superior orbit, and there was some amount of sinusitis also. This is the lesion. Now, here we have a peripheral enhancement. Now, this was a case of superior subperiosteal abscess. Now, this child is a new here. Now, here is a tightly swollen, inflamed eye. The eyelids are also red, but the sagittal section of the CT scan orbit showed a cystic lesion with a central hyperdense area in the superior rectus LPS complex. So it was a scolex, and it was a case of myocystic sarcosis. Now, considering this case, the sagittal section of the T2 weighted images of the MRI orbit, this showed some heterogeneous increased intensity in the inferior orbit involving the inferior rectus muscle. Now, this case required a tissue diagnosis, and on doing a histopathology, we got it to be a case of lymphoma. Now, this is another interesting case, and this case is very relevant in the current scenario. These are the axial cuts of CT scan and MRI orbit. This is a patient's picture having the clinical pictures of orbital cellulitis, where we show the right orbital cellulitis with invasion of the paranasal sinuses. Here and here, this eye was PL negative. So after tissue diagnosis, we obtained the tissue diagnosis as it was a case of orbital fungal infection. So examination of the other system is very important. In the current scenario, ENT examination is important because in ENT examination in children as well as in adults, in children usually less than 9 years of age, we get the infections of most commonly bacterial single common infection, whereas in case of adult, we get a mixed infections if it is a bacterial because of the properly developed sinus. Now, the treatment varies accordingly. The ENT examination is important in the current scenario, the nasal endoscopy, and especially the tissue biopsy in suspected cases. CNS evaluation and Glasgow Coma Scale scoring is important for assessing the spread of the infection to the central nervous system or spread of malignancy or involvement of the cavernous sinus or brain, etc. The abdominal examination can rule out presence of any other lump in the abdomen. So examination of the other systems carry very important role. Now, how the tissue diagnosis helps us? Now, tissue diagnosis can be done and endoscopically or directly. It can be navigation guided as well. Endoscopy guided nasal or sinus biopsy, orbital biopsy, and in selective cases of biopsy from the extraocular muscle. Yes, after obtaining the tissue is sent for appropriate staining, and in special situation, polymerase chain reaction. A group of doctors consisting of hematologists, pathologists, microbiologists, and the molecular biologists will help us to give a proper diagnosis. This is a case of orbital tumor which presented as an initial manifestation of acute myeloid leukemia as a granulocytic sarcoma. This was a case report, and tissue diagnosis is important because of all these things. Thank you very much. চলো পরের স্লাইডটা। Now I shall proceed to the next talk, which is on orbital infection. Orbital infection can be caused by bacteria, fungus, or virus. The bacterial infections, the common bacteria we encounter are Staphylococcus aureus, Streptococcus pyogenes, Klebsiella, and in endemic areas, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. Now, what are the investigations? As I've already told you, is a complete blood count and the peripheral smear is the first line. Blood culture, culture from surgical aspirate. Blood culture is not very conclusive. Yes, from the culture from surgical aspirate, sometimes give us the clue. And obviously the imaging, the CT scan is of time. It will be a case. Now, this presentation is a case-based discussion. Now, I'll discuss the first case as a small child who presented with inflamed red eye with excoriation, and there was a mild proptosis also. The eye had a discharge, and this patient, it was very difficult to open the eyes. There was a history of some insect bite. Now, keeping all this in mind, we went for an imaging because it's a small child with pictures like infection. So imaging gave us the picture of a preseptal cellulitis. There was a diffuse soft tissue thickening and areas of enhancement anterior to the orbital septum. Now, what is the plan of management for preseptal cellulitis? The first important point is a close observation of the patient to see that it is not turning into an orbital cellulitis. We have to put the patient on antibiotics. It can be oral, it can be systemic, intravenous. Now, the antibiotic combination can be amoxicillin, clavulanic acid, or first generation cephalosporin, the analgesics and lubricants as the situation permits. The second case here, the lady with the inflamed proptosed eyelid with the conjunctival prolapse. Now, the CT scan orbit showed extracorneal soft tissue mass with fat stranding along with sinusitis. It was a case of orbital cellulitis. Patient had a history of fever. Now, how to manage a case of orbital cellulitis? The first point, that patient has to be admitted in a hospital. We have to send the blood samples for complete blood count, peripheral smear, and for the blood biochemistry that includes blood sugar, serum urea, creatinine, and if required, you can send the blood culture also. Now, the radiological facility, if it is available, even if it is not in the scenario, we have to send the patient for a CT scan. And without waiting for the report of the CT scan, we have to start the patient on empirical antibiotic therapy and analgesics as necessary. Nasal decongestant drops to be put entirely. ENT and pediatric opinion is sought as required. We have to assess the patient twice daily as vision, extraocular movement, papillary reaction. And after obtaining the CT scan report, we have to decide what to do and whether there is any emergency surgical intervention required or not. Now, what is the antibiotic regime? Vancomycin, clindamycin, plus third generation cephalosporin combination, or an ampicillin sulbactam, or an amoxicillin clavulinate, or a piperacillin tazobactam. Now, amikacin or empiric coverage for methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus for areas of endemic for the organism. There are many recommendations. Now, commonly The combination of cloxacillin and third generation cephalosporin or fluoroquinolones are used as the starting antibiotic empirical therapy. Now, there are certain points of debates. Number one is what will be the duration of intravenous antibiotic therapy? What will be the duration of intravenous antibiotic therapy? It should be such that, number one, patient will have a sustained recovery, and secondly, it will prevent relapse and readmission. So approximately 2 weeks time is required. We have to resort to surgery if there is development of RAPD at any point of time, the failure of the fever to abate within 36 hours, clinical deterioration after 48 hours, and lack of improvement after 72 hours. Now, considering this is the case 3, it's an inflamed eye with proptosis and hypotropia and mild exodeviation. The axial section of the CT scan orbit showed a medial juxtaosseous collection with peripheral enhancement along with the sinusitis. It was suggestive of a medial subperiosteal abscess. And this is a case 4, where we have a proptosis and hypotropic eye with ptosis, and we get superior subperiosteal abscess as shown from the axial and
Ma'am, I'm going to interrupt you. The time is up for the presentation, so I request you to please conclude it so that we can move on to the next speaker.
Madam, it is my second topic, and it is I have continued the 2 presentation simultaneously.
Each speaker is 15 minutes for us this time. So each speaker is getting 15 minutes for their presentation. So
okay.
For both the presentations, so I'll just add on 2 more minutes for you so that you can conclude it, and then we'll move on to the next speaker.
Okay. Now, the subperiosteal abscess, there are various protocols to have a medical versus surgical role, and I'll try to discuss the 5th case, which is an old 82-year-old male who presented with painful swelling of the right eyelids, bulging of the right eye, and decreased vision. That eye was PLPR defective, and patient had RAPD. Now, on investigations, the fasting sugar and the PP sugar were both high. The axial cuts of CT and MRI showed right orbital cellulitis with paranasal sinusitis with bony necrosis and acute neuritis. Started on antibiotic drugs and IV antibiotic, intravenous liposomal lympho-B, intraorbital lympho-B. Patient left without medical advice, but when he came back, there was increased invasion of the paranasal sinuses. And then diagnostic endoscopy, it was a black eschar in the nasal mucosa, and we did an endoscopy guided nasal swab. So we got a fungal hyphae. Extended enucleation with endoscopy guided sinus debridement was done with the AMPO-B irrigation under GA, and samples were sent for histopathology and microbiological confirmation. And it came out to be a case of mucormycosis. So in this pandemic situation, it was a case of orbital mucormycosis, and it had the risk factors many presentations. The investigations include the imaging, histology, and different alternative treatment. Now, proposed staging of ROCM system has come up in the COVID mucor guidelines and the treatment also, where the basic thing is the local debridement of the necrotic tissue and establishment of adequate sinus drainage. Now, this is the case 6, where we see myocystic sarcosis and the treatment of it being albendazole and visolone. So the take-home message is high index of suspicion, prompt management, and surgery when it is indicated. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this presentation. Now we are moving ahead towards our next presenter, Dr. Joyita Das. Ma'am, I would request you to start your presentation. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Joyita.
Am I audible? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yes, okay. I'd like to thank AIOC organizing committee and Dr. Raka Chakraborty for the kind invitation. So I'll be talking on orbital inflammatory diseases. What is orbital inflammatory disease? it's an umbrella term which represents an etiologically diverse spectrum of condition, which is unified in their association with abnormal inflammation in the periorbital region. It is characterized by pain, proptosis, ptosis, extraocular movement limitation, dry eye, and dimness of vision. It can be classified as specific inflammatory orbital disease, where a specific clinical or pathological or radiological identity can be fits in, but the rest of the cases where no definite clinical, radiological, or pathological diagnosis could be made out are classified as non-specific or idiopathic orbital inflammatory disease, or IOID, or pseudotumor, we used to call it earlier. So a benign non-infective inflammatory condition of the orbit without any identifiable local or systemic cause are called NSOID or IOID. So if on the basis of anatomical location, if it can be classified as myocytic when the extraocular muscle are only involved, or non-myocytic when there is lacrimal gland involved, it is called dacroadenitis, and when fibrofatty tissue along with other structure like lacrimal gland, muscle, etc. is involved, it is called diffuse IOID. Some of the rare type of idiopathic orbital inflammation are apical when it involves the apex, periscleritis, trochleitis, perineuritis, and perineuritis. And the classification of inflammatory disease on and
Your audio was not clear.
It's not clear. Okay. 42 years old gentleman. Now it is okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
42 years old gentleman presented with sudden pain in the left eye, which exacerbates on the right gaze. He has redness and diplopia. On examination, the blood examination, thyroid, including thyroid profile, everything was normal, except the ESR was high. On MRI, you can see that in the left eye, there is swelling of the lateral rectus muscle belly along with its insertion. So it is diagnosed as a case of orbital myositis, and patient has been given oral prednisolone, and he has recovered with this. So orbital myositis usually has acute onset. There will be severe pain, and pain exacerbates on the movement away from the involved muscle. Like if this patient has involvement of the lateral rectus muscle, so when the patient is looking towards the right side, there is excessive pain. There will be conjunctival redness, lid swelling, diplopia, and investigation of choice is either CT scan or MRI. In MRI, you can see the muscle and tendon involvement better. The next case is in 42 years old lady. She presented with recurrent history of both eye upper lid swelling and heaviness and little pain. And for the last few years, she has on and off treated with some oral steroid by some local doctors. On investigation, all the blood parameters, including P and K, C and K, rheumatoid factor, everything is normal. Even the thyroid profile also normal. It's only she has a Mantoux test was borderline. So I have advised her to do a quantiferon TB gold. It came to be negative. So we have to do. We have done a orbital incision biopsy, and on incision, the CT scan orbit enlargement of the both lacrimal gland, and on incision biopsy, it came to be a lacrimal gland tissue infiltrated with histiocytes and multinucleated giant cell with few non-caseating granuloma, but there was no acid fat bacilli on Jarenstein. So this case has been diagnosed as a case of NSOID or idiopathic orbital inflammatory disease, and she has been put on oral prednisolone acetate in a tapered dose. So dacryoadenitis may be unilateral or bilateral. It may present simultaneously or sequentially. It has an acute or subacute onset. There may be mild to moderate pain. And in acroadenitis patient, around 50% patient presents with a dry eye, and the shape of the eyelid is usually S-shaped. This is the third case. He is a 50 years old male presented with acute proptosis, congestion, and dimness of vision in the left eye. He has been treated. He also has been treated with some suboptimal dose of steroid by some local doctors. On examination, his vision on presentation was 6/60, and this is the left eye disc photo showing disc edema, suggestive of compressive optic neuropathy. On CT MRI orbit, you can see there is diffuse hyperintensity in the entire intraconal space, and the lesion is inserting the optic nerve. So we perform a orbital incision biopsy, and on incision biopsy, it came to be a diffuse infiltration, predominantly with lymphocyte and neutrophil, plasma cell, histiocytes, and stromal edema, but there is no fibrosis. This case has been idiopathic inflammation is usually presents as unilateral, but it is a tendency to recur. It presents with proptosis, ophthalmoplegia, and dimness of vision due to perineuritis. Other differential diagnosis of this condition is acute thyroid eye disease, orbital cell. This discussion will not be completed if I don't orbital disease. This is a novel clinical entity, which is actually a systemic condition in which fibro-inflammatory lesion rich in immunoglobulin G4 and plasma cell can be present in a single or multiple organs of the body. And when it involves the eye, it is known as immunoglobulin G4 related ophthalmic disease. Histopathologic appearance of immunoglobulin G4 disease resembles that of idiopathic orbital inflammatory disease. And over the past decade, immunoglobulin G4 disease recognized as a possible cause of idiopathic orbital disease. Here is a nice study by Dr. Akshay Gopinathan Nair et al. And they have actually retrospectively reviewed some of the diagnosis of slides of orbital inflammatory disease and orbital lymphoproliferative disease, and they found that previously diagnosed cases among the previously diagnosed cases of idiopathic orbital inflammation, and 44% actually ultimately came to be a immunoglobulin G4 disease. So when we are diagnosing a case of idiopathic orbital inflammatory disease, we should look for this plasma cells and the immunohistochemistry for immunoglobulin G4. These are the diagnostic criteria of immunoglobulin G4 disease. It is published by the Japanese group, and in the diagnostic criteria of G4, these are either imaging of the lacrimal gland, trigeminal nerve, extraocular muscle, and hypertrophic lesion in various ophthalmic tissue. And histopathologically, there shows marked lymphocyte and plasma site infiltration, and this plasma site should be more than 40% should be immunoglobulin G4 positive, and the blood test of the patient should show elevation of the serum immunoglobulin G4 at more than 135 milligram per deciliter. So to diagnose the idiopathic orbital inflammation, first you have to take a careful history, clinical findings, CT scan or MRI. Important whether it is acute, subacute or chronic. If the patient has any systemic illness or not should be taken care, and the personal history, addiction history should be taken. Age, it is usually occurs in middle-aged patient, and if the patient is less than 10 years or more than 75 years, this suggestive of some non-idiopathic, there may be some specific reason. It should actually is probably not idiopathic orbital inflammation. It may be both unilateral or bilateral, and mostly in systemic disease, it is usually bilateral. Female are more prone to male, but in idiopathic IgG4 disease, males are more common. Other sign like lead sign of thyroid eye disease and saddle nose in Wegener has to be also looked for. On imaging, CT scan is the standard practice, but now MRI with contrast is a preferred choice in diagnosing in a case of idiopathic orbital inflammation. I'll show you why. Because in the first picture, the one patient is showing some involvement of the lacrimal gland and the part of the extracorneal orbit, but it is giving us a differential diagnosis of either it could be a lymphoma or a idiopathic inflammation, or it could be some epithelial lesion of the lacrimal gland. But when you do the fat suppressed contrast and gadolinium enhanced enhancement, there is you can see there is also preseptal involvement along with postseptal tissue also involved. So this ideally lead to a diagnosis of idiopathic that is inflammatory disease, not epithelial tumor. So, now come to the role of orbital biopsy. Tissue biopsy is a critical diagnostic step in non-myocytic idiopathic orbital inflammation, but incision biopsy indicated in cases of suboptimal response to steroid therapy. And it's have to take care that adequate representative tissue has to be taken. Corticosteroids should be stopped before biopsy. Initial incision biopsy in orbital inflammation is not indicated in case of myositis and apical inflammation. This is a simplified approach published by Mumbers et al. How to proceed for diagnosis and treatment. They have shown if you are suspecting some idiopathic inflammation, if the lacrimal gland is involved, then we have to look for is it a cause is identifiable or not. If the cause is identified, that it could be tumor or something else, then it is probably not idiopathic or idiopathic lesion. And if the mass there is no identifiable mass, then we have to go for biopsy. And if the biopsy is consistent with idiopathic inflammation, then it is a non-myocytic, idiopathic inflammation. And you have to treat the patient in that line. And if the patient has some enlarged extraocular muscle, if we can find the identifiable, cannot find the identifiable reason, then we can straightforward start corticosteroid trial, and we can diagnose the patient as myocytic idiopathic or inflammation. And if we found if we suspect some specific disease like sarcoid, lymphoma, etc., we have to do a biopsy first. And if the biopsy is consistent with inflammation, then the treatment or line of treatment will be steroid treatment, as in myocytic IOI. And if there is specific pathological findings found, then the treatment should be in that line. So the management of idiopathic orbital inflammation are, if it is a mild one, simple non-steroidal or non-steroidal inflammatory drugs in NSAIDs is enough. And if the disease is moderate to severe, first you have to give a corticosteroid trial. Corticosteroid trial is 1 milligram per kg body weight per day in a tapered dose. If the response response satisfactory, then continue the treatment. If there is optimal response, then go for a incision biopsy and treat. My third case and NSAIDs. The second line of treatment is radiotherapy and methotrexate if the patient is not responsive to corticosteroid and patient cannot tolerate steroids. Sorry, yeah, this is my last slide. And the third line of treatment is mycophenolate mofetil, cyclosporin, and some biologics like rituximab, infliximab. So IOID represents a diagnostic and therapeutic challenge for many ophthalmologists. IOID is actually an umbrella term which says diagnosis of exclusion. So other pathological condition affecting the orbit should be ruled out first. Proper history, examination, and imaging and serologic tests help to streamline the diagnosis. Corticosteroid is the mainstay of therapy, and it should be done in a optimum doses, no low dose of corticosteroid. And orbital incision biopsy is crucial in atypical cases. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for this presentation. Now we are moving ahead, and I would request Dr. Bhaduri to please come forward and present. I would request ma'am, Dr. Bhaduri ma'am, to please unmute herself and start the camera and start the presentation.
I am sorry, I'm not a ma'am.
I am sorry, sir. I would like to welcome Dr. Bhaduri Anirban to the presentation.
That's fine. That's fine.
Request you, sir, to please start the presentation.
Uh, yeah, thank you, Dr. Raka Chatterjee, for inviting me to join your instruction course. We had two very cool presentations about the more common aspects of hot orbit, namely infections and the inflammations. So I'll deal with something which is a little on the warmer side. Okay, so sometimes orbital malignancies do present as hot orbit, and it is important as a clinician for us to recognize the danger signs so that we do not end up with a disaster on our hands. Now, as I was saying, that orbital diseases may present with orbital inflammation, the malignant tumors, for example, and this is usually when you have a rapidly growing malignant tumor, or you have a secreting type of malignant tumor. And it's important that we are aware of such masquerade presentation so that we can make an early diagnosis. Now, orbital tumors of malignant neoplasms would either be primary, that is tumors arising from the tissues of the orbit, or secondary if they come from an adjacent structure, or metastatic if it comes from a distant source. So let's look at what is known as the commonest primary malignancy of the orbit in children. And this is an 11-year-old girl who's presenting with a rapidly increasing mass in the superomedial orbit with signs of inflammation in the eyelid. There is redness, there is edema as well as prominent blood vessels and chemosis here. And this is the typical presentation for rhabdomyosarcoma, and you do an incision biopsy, confirm the diagnosis, and then the patient is treated by pediatric oncologists. And the survival for the most common form, which is the embryonic rhabdomyosarcoma, is around 80%, which is fairly good. So this is another child in slightly later presentation with signs of a hot orbit here again. And the primary tumor again is arising from the superomedial orbit, but that is not always the case. You can have tumors arising from other parts of the orbit as well. Okay, so this was a boy who presented similarly with a short history, about a 2 weeks history, rapidly progressing mass. The eyeball has been pushed down with chemosis, and there is a mass lesion. So there is no difficulty in thinking that this is an orbital cellulitis. And the problem is this is the typical age where you would have rhabdomyosarcoma, and we wanted to do an incision biopsy the very next day. So we sent him for his tests, and this is the buffy layer, okay? And his WBC counts was around 40,000. And these are the large cells that he had. He had acute myeloid leukemia. So that's again one presentation of malignancy pretending to be a orbital inflammation. This is a lady who was on treatment for glaucoma. She presented with a suddenly increasing swelling for a period of a week. She was given oral steroids, which helped her to some extent. But you've seen similar pictures a little while back. Both our colleagues have presented similar. So you see this soft tissue lesion, which is involving the entire intraconal orbit, also spilling over to the extraconal portion here, but the muscles are intact, the optic nerve is intact, but it's completely encompassed by this lesion. And so we stopped this patient's steroids, the swelling came back, and within a week of stopping steroids, we did the biopsy, and this was an aggressive lymphoma. This is a diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. And this patient is alive 3 years later after treatment. So this was a patient, this is from my fellowship days. This was a lesson that we learned. So he worked as a gardener, and he presented with nasal discharge, and this is typically what you would see in a mucormycosis today. Okay, so nasal involvement, orbital involvement, bone destruction. We thought it was aspergillosis. He actually had undergone an ENT biopsy before he was sent to LV Prasad. And they did show fungi, but it was an unusual fungus. And this patient would not respond to antifungals. We went ahead and did orbital biopsies, including deep biopsies, and this came out to be a very unusual diagnosis, an NK T-cell lymphoma. These natural killer T-cell lymphomas are very aggressive. 2 weeks after presentation, this patient died because of CNS involvement. This is another gentleman. He's 60 years old, presented with proptosis, a lot of inflammation, a corneal ulcer as well due to exposure. And you see there is a lacrimal gland mass which is crossing the center line here. It seems fairly well circumscribed, but there are areas of calcification within the lesion here. And if you look at this particular scan, you would see that the periosteum is lifted off. So this is actually infiltrating beyond the periosteum into the bone. And clinically, we thought this was an advanced cystic carcinoma, and yes, on this biopsy, this is exactly what showed. And we did a complete lumpectomy in this case. This was an unusual case. This lady was 4 years old. She had sudden onset of pain, swelling, and diminished vision in the left eye. And she was on IVMP therapy when she was referred to us with scans. And this is what her scan showed. So you can see this multiple cystic lesions with fluid level on MRI, which is very typical of a common orbital vascular malformation, the lymphangioma. And what we did was we did an aspiration from the orbit to reduce the swelling, and we sent that for cytology, and it turned out to be containing malignant cells. So we went in, did an incisional biopsy through an orbitotomy, debulked the mass, sent it for histopath, and it turned out to be angiosarcoma. Okay, so this is another patient present with orbital inflammation with restricted eye movements, chemosis, and pain. On the scans, what you can see is an irregular mass which is infiltrative. It is involving the medial as well, the superior rectus LPS complex as well as the lateral rectus here, irregular mass. And on histopathology, this turned out to be metastatic adenocarcinoma. It was signet cell carcinoma, so probably arising from the GI tract. This patient was referred to an oncologist and thereafter was lost to follow-up from. So this is a contribution of Dr. Das. Again, another metastatic adenocarcinoma. This time it is renal cell carcinoma. So metastatic tumors usually of a secreting origin, often present as an inflamed orbit. This is a fairly common situation that we see. There's a child who's presenting with orbital cellulitis. What you need to do is lift up the lid, and you would usually find a ophthalmic eye or an eye with a white reflex. And the USG tells you what is the real story. So this is a child with retinoblastoma presenting as a orbital cellulitis. Now these orbital cellulitis are actually not infective origin. They are inflammatory, which is secondary to its sterile, secondary to a necrotic retinoblastoma. Okay, so this is another lady. This patient again had a prominent eye for about 10 weeks. This patient was on IVMP therapy. She had actually received 3 doses of the drug before she reached us. She was referred because she was not responding to the steroid. I hope this scan is visible. It is not. And okay. And this is what a CT scan showed. So she has this irregular swelling in the lateral rectus muscle, and signs of severe inflammation. So we were wondering whether we are dealing again with a case of an aggressive lymphoma. And she underwent a biopsy from the muscle. We debulked the tumor. It was soft and cheesy. And what was shocking is the diagnosis. So this turned out to be a tumor, which at that point in time, I was unaware of. I had to do a lot of reading for that. And it turned out to be an inflammatory myofibroblastic tumor. This was a more aggressive myofibroblastic tumor. So these on histopath, they seem to look like a non-specific orbital inflammation, but on immunohistochemistry, they look for a specific marker, which is the ALK. This patient was ALK positive in the cytoplasm. And what we came to know about this disease is that it's a locally aggressive tumor, usually occurs in the subperiosteal, in the retroperitoneal space, or sometimes in the thorax, rarely reported in the orbit. So we'd seen this patient in 2015. At that time, there were only 4 case reports of this disease. And this patient, after the debulking, was given steroids because this is supposed to be a steroid responsive tumor. The swelling actually increased after about a month and a half, and that is the time when we went ahead and did an orbital exentration for her. So few tumors, I'm sorry, but that's how it is always. It's mostly inflammations which are infections or of idiopathic origin or specific inflammations. Tumors are less likely, but you still need to be aware of them. And what you need to have is a high index of suspicion and get imaging done for all patients who present with orbital inflammation, because you never know what might turn up from there. Even for something like, say, idiopathic orbital inflammation, or for infections, you need the scans to decide your line of management. So here too, for every patient with orbital inflammation, get a CT scan done. And have a low threshold for incision biopsy. Joyita showed so beautifully various kinds of orbital inflammation, which were non-infective in origin. And this term idiopathic orbital inflammation simply means that we don't know what is going on. Okay, histopathology is what has shown that a lot of these idiopathic diseases are actually specific orbital inflammation. Without a histopath, you would not get that information. Similarly, IgG4 disease, we didn't even know about it about 8 years back. IgG4 seems to be the one of the major causes of what we used to think as idiopathic inflammation. So the more you biopsy, the more new conditions will be diagnosed, and this entity of non-specific orbital inflammation will actually shrink with time. So that is all I have for you. Thank you very much. How do I stop share? Okay.
Thank you, Suri. So now we can move ahead towards our next presenter, Dr. Chandana Chakraborty. Welcome, ma'am. Welcome to the panel, and you can go ahead with your presentation now.
Very good afternoon to all of you. Thanks to the AIOS organizer. Thanks to Dr. Raka for inviting me to talk on my favorite topic. Actually, I'm thankful to my previous presenter, Dr. Raka, Dr. Anirban, and Dr. Joyita, because they have talked so much about this topic that I don't have much to talk actually. But still, I'm trying to do justice to the talk. Pediatric hot orbit can often present with puzzling clinical scenario. Thorough ocular and systemic examination is a must in all such cases, and timely diagnosis and management can save the vision and many a time the lives. Coming to my first case, this was an interesting case. The boy came to us with pain, swelling, features of orbital cellulitis. And we treated the patient with broad spectrum IV antibiotic, and the patient responded well. And after 7 days, we discharged the patient.
Sorry to interrupt you, ma'am.
Yes.
Please share the screen.
The screen. Is it okay? Is it okay? Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible. Yes, ma'am, you are audible. Ma'am, put on the slideshow.
Is it okay now?
Yes, ma'am.
This is okay.
Yes, ma'am.
6 years boy who came with pain, swelling and all restricted ocular motility. We did the routine blood investigation and imaging of NCCT shows that there was an heterogeneous mass lesion in the extracorneal area. And we started the patient with IV vancomycin and metrozil, and the patient responded well. And after 1 week, the patient was discharged from the hospital. Then the patient, this was a picture of 1 week. At follow-up 3 weeks, the patient came back with a picture like this. Again, the patient was having fever and there was reappearance of the swelling. So we were thinking that we are missing something. We did tried an MRI now. MRI told that this could be a rhabdomyosarcoma. So we thought we will do an FNAC. So while trying FNAC, we got this one. There is a thick cheesy pus came out, and which no bacillus bacilli was found. The gram stain shows that there was some Staph aureus, and we just changed the antibiotic from vancomycin to linezolid this time, and the patient responded very well. The extraocular motility came back, and this was the MRI picture at 1 month. Patient is doing well now. This is another case who came to us with pain, fever, and history of injury with some foreign body. Foreign body was removed twice before he came to us. Then again we did an MRI. We found that there was actually 2 foreign body which was removed first time but left later. So again we planned for surgery under GA, and a foreign body was removed. So we can sometimes miss this type of foreign bodies, the single sitting, or even we may require second or third sitting also. Preseptal cellulitis already discussed by my co-speaker, so I'm not going to all these things. These are the sources of infections. Dental causes are very important thing in case of children specifically. Dental, this was a boy who came with a subperiosteal abscess. Actually, this was a CT of that boy. And then this is acute diffuse cystitis. This is another cause of orbital cellulitis. Management, I'm not going, already my co-speakers have told. So this is how we will go for investigations. The imaging, in case of children, specifically MRI, we don't do much. Why? Because the MRI is difficult. This is CT is more available. It is a low cost, and it is a time, MRI is time consuming. So in that way, the CT is better than MRI in case of children. But in a case of orbital cellulitis, we do not go straight forward on the first day for the CT. Initially, in the children, we do the investigations. We do only the CBCA blood count and all these things, and we start empirical treatment. And if it does not respond, then after 48 hours, the patient doesn't respond, then we go for imaging. Otherwise, we don't expose the child for imaging right at the beginning of starting the treatment. If you think that there is an intraorbital foreign body is there, or if you think that it is a rhinosinusitis something, then you can go for imaging in the very beginning. We start the empirical treatment like this, and based on the specific thing, culture from the conjunctival swab, rarely we take that, or you can do in blood culture also, but very rarely it comes positive, because already you have started the patient on antibiotic therapy, specific therapy with vancomycin and IV ceftriaxone along with metronidazole. Sometimes you may have to use steroid either from the after you, if you are sure that you have controlled the the infection with antibiotic, then go for the steroid, oral steroid or IV steroid you can give. Topical and nasal decongestants are recommended also. Then where you will go for surgical, in case of children, surgical intervention indication is very less. Less than 9 years, we do not go for surgical intervention. Even in a case of subperiosteal abscess, we don't go for, because they usually resolve on its own. Like in the beginning, which I showed you that case of the dental abscess from the dental infection, that case there was a spontaneous release of pus from the gum and the child was relieved. So if you think that it is dire necessary, then only we'll go for surgery. Or if you think that there is an foreign body, then you go. Or if you think that there is an abscess in the cranium, then you can go for the craniotomy and all these things. Otherwise, usually we don't go for surgery. Fungal orbital cellulitis, this was one case I still remember. A long time back, I got this patient. The child was actually a case of acute lymphatic leukemia, and there was aspergillosis, not the mucor which you are getting right now. Aspergillosis, and there was an exenteration was done, and the child was given a prosthetic eye. This was a case already Raka has showed that how this referred from a peripheral center with an orbital cellulitis picture, but later we found that this is actually a case of parasitic cysticercosis. Remember, in all these cases, you have to treat the cases for a long time, not the short period. The steroid will be continued for at least maybe a patient can require 3 months in a tapering dose, because once you stop the steroid, then again the patient come back with the same complaint. And along with the steroid, the most vital thing is albendazole. Neurocysticercosis, many times there is no association of neurocysticercosis in this type of patient. So this was the follow-up picture of the boy in 3 months. This was another case. Nirban has already talked about this orbital cellulitis, so I'm not going to talk on this. Orbital cellulitis, many a time, this is the presenting feature of a retinoblastoma. Coming into the next case, this is also, Anirban has talked it. I'm not going to, this is a rhabdomyosarcoma. Rarely we get this type of case. In the beginning, we always start with antibiotic and all, but later we found that this is something else. This was a case, this patient actually, I remember the patient came from far periphery of Hooghly district. Initially, as usual, I treated with antibiotic orbital cellulitis line, but the patient was not improving much. So we did an MRI. That time we found that there was actually, this was a diagnosis of actually radiological diagnosis. They said it is could be a pseudotumor. So steroid was added in high dose and the child improved. Sometimes a bilateral, as in this case, a bilateral pseudotumor is common in case of children, not in adults. So you have to keep in mind it when you. This is also, Anirban has showed you the cases. A child can also come to us with an acute onset proptosis with pain. So this was a case of lymphangioma. We started the patient on oral steroid, and the patient, after 2 weeks, the patient actually came back. The patient was relieved. But remember that patient may come back to you again and again, because these things actually, the lesion, the malformation, the lymphangioma persists. But the acute presentation is because of the bleeding inside the lymphangioma. So to differentiate the cases of hot orbit in a case of children, it could be orbital cellulitis, the orbital cellulitis, or it could be a pseudotumor, or could be an orbital tumor like retinoblastoma. It could be panophthalmitis or an insect bite can sometimes, a junior can mistake it as an orbital cellulitis. A viral conjunctivitis, believe me, in a case of children, 1-year child came to me in my earlier days with bilateral severe hematoma sort of picture. I thought it could be something else, swelling. So vital conjunctivitis also you can make. So what are the red flags in these cases of hot orbit? In case of children specifically, be careful whether the proptosis is increasing or not, whether there is a displacement is increasing. It could be an abscess in that scenario. The extraocular muscle restriction, whether it is painful or it is increasing. Then chemosis, appearance of chemosis, changes in the visual acuity and the pupillary reaction. All these are red flag when you have to admit the patient positively and take necessary action. So every case of childhood hot orbit needs to be analyzed individually with special attention to ocular and systemic disability. Management includes multidisciplinary approach involving various subspecialties. Non-invasive investigative tools and imaging studies should precede the invasive tools to achieve a proper diagnosis. Please remember that while dealing a case of hot orbit, deal the hot orbit without burning your hands. So thank you all for your patient sharing. Thanks to the viewers. Screen now what happened?
Screening.
Okay.
Very nice presentation, ma'am.
I am afraid actually. Sometimes I think whether we are audible or not. This is a very...
People of our generation have this problem. Which switch to press? Are we audible and these issues? Sometimes I forget to get my slides.
Thanks for your patience hearing.
Madam, thank you very much for this nice presentation.
Thank you, Raka,
Thank
for
you.
including me.
Are there any questions?
Any questions? Yes. Dr. Bhaduri,
Yes, ma'am.
any question that you would like to discuss?
Yes, I
Dr. Chandana ma'am,
want to ask
Joyita.
you and Joyita, this is something that Dr. Chandana Chakraborty touched upon when she was talking about orbital cellulitis. Is would you use steroids?
Yes, I use steroids.
So when will you use steroids?
Actually, recently the ENT people actually, they are insisting us to use the steroid. They are saying there is another entity has coming up, allergic rhino-orbital cellulitis sort of thing, allergic fungal cellulitis, allergic fungal cellulitis. So whatever it is, you have to start the antibiotic IV at the beginning, and then after 48 hours, if you see there is involvement of the pupillary reaction or the patient's visual acuity is deteriorating, in all those conditions, actually, you have to use the steroid because we have our experience the last few years.
So does Dr. Raka Chatterjee have something to say, or Joyita? You would want to add anything about the steroid therapy in orbital cellulitis?
Yes, if I rule out that it is not fungal one, I used to give steroid after starting the antibiotic.
Okay. So
And the results is
Joyita, what I'm specifically trying to get out is that when you have a patient with orbital cellulitis, you started the patient on antibiotic.
yes.
When do you start the steroid? So there is a critical
No,
time.
at least 48 hours. I take the
for
time 48 hours.
Okay.
Yes.
Raka, what do you do? What is your practice?
Yes, I also start with the antibiotic first and then wait for 48 hours and then I start on steroid if the patient is responding.
Okay. So we've seen patients going blind because they were not given steroids. So their infection is taken care of, their optic nerve.
Yes, if the infection is taken care of, we can start steroid. And another, actually, the fungal infection has come up nowadays. So we have to be a little careful while starting steroids.
So even in aspergillosis, if your patient is on antifungal therapy for about 2 weeks, in
2 weeks.
invasive orbital disease with fungus, we don't give steroids, right? But then we don't even go for a complete clearance.
Yes, the inflammation will not subside.
Antifungals are basically fungistatic. There are no fungicidal antifungals.
Yes.
So for aspergillosis, to control the inflammatory part of the thing, there are two things. There is the fungal invasion and there is the inflammatory response to the fungus. to take care of that, we do start steroids under the cover of antifungals. But that is after about 2 weeks of initiating antifungal therapy. And these patients are on long-term antifungal therapy with voriconazole. But for mucormycosis, that's an absolute no-no. In mucormycosis, we all know that steroids actually can be a
Yes.
precipitating cause for the infection. And there you're actually trying to save the life of the patient, not the vision of the patient. So steroids is an absolute no-no in mucormycosis. Any other questions? Joyita, may I ask you a question?
Yes, sir, please.
We've been having problems with the diagnosis of IgG4 disease in the orbit.
Yes, sir.
So what we do is we do get serum IgG4 levels
Yes, sir.
tested. But do you know a place where they're actually doing immunohistochemistry for IgG4?
Sir, in Apollo Hospital, Apollo Clinicals, they are doing.
Okay, that's surprising because we sent 2 patients to them. These patients are presumed IgG4 disease on the basis of the histopathology. And they have IgG4 raised serum levels. But you have a presentation at 3 now. But we've been asking them and they do not have the markers for IgG4 for tissue diagnosis. Which is why
Tissue diagnosis, yes, tissue diagnosis. Actually, I tried on Tata Medical Center also. They are also not doing. Recently, I got a case is highly suspicious of IgG4.
it seems IgG4 tissue marker for IHC is not available in
Yes, no, this is not. But the IgG4, the blood level, serum level, Apollo is doing.
It's a good indicator. So any experience with sarcoidosis and Wegener's? Your
No,
one
not
of the
it.
cases seems to be a case of sarcoidosis, the one with bilateral
Yes, yes.
carditis in the baby.
Okay, so sorry to interrupt you. So the time for the panel discussion is up, but since we have finished before the session, so you guys can still take more 5 minutes for the panel discussion. And one more request, I request all of you to please switch on your cameras since all these sessions are recorded live. So I request you all to please switch on your cameras. Thank you. And we can go ahead and do the panel discussion for more 5 minutes since we are before time.
Thank you.
To you, ma'am.
What was I asking? I just forgot. Okay, so one of your patients seemed to be a case of sarcoidosis, the one where you had granulomatous inflammation from your
Yes,
lacrimal
yes.
gland biopsy.
Yes, sir. But the patient is serum AC level was negative and
Was
lysozyme also negative. So I was at first I also thought of that it could be a sarcoid, but ultimately it came out to be granulomatous inflammation.
Because you had non-caseating granuloma.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. My first diagnosis, my first DD was tuberculosis, sarcoidosis. I have been specifically written in my histopathology form also. But I spoke to, actually my friend is in, my batchmate is in Ryan Trivedi. So I spoke to him also, but
Okay.
he ultimately confirmed no, there is no such thing, either sarcoid or
You
so
felt
it's
that it was
ultimately,
not sarcoidosis on the
No,
basis
no,
of
no.
histopathology.
yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Joyita. If there are no questions, ma'am,
Yeah.
we could declare the session closed.
Yes.
So thank you very much for such a beautiful session and such a beautiful panel discussion. This is perhaps the first virtual AIOC that we have today and for next 2 days also. And thanks to AIOC for organizing the program such beautifully.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.